is a really fascinating animal. They're very feisty, fierce, wild birds. They look nice and cuddly, but they really aren't at all. And yet they're incredibly gentle towards each other. They all have their own characteristic. They're just fascinating little animals.
The African penguin has been in steep decline over the last couple of decades, mainly due to climate change and overfishing.
The sad truth for the African penguin is they've just had it a bit too hard for too long. They've had to deal with oiling and egg collecting and guano scraping.
It's actually astounding how quick the species is vanishing in the wild. This has led the International Union for the Conservation of Nature to uplist, as we say, the species from its vulnerable status previously to endangered.
We are now sitting with a population of about 25,000 breeding pairs, whereas in the 1950s we had 150,000.
So if they carried on at the rate they were going, you could lose the entire population in a very short space of time. So that is the reality.
Bristol Zoo has a long history of being involved with breeding the African penguin. We keep a colony of about 65 in here that is breeding every year. A couple of years ago, our curator of birds had the idea of using the experience that we had to safeguard the species in the wild with the chick bolstering project that we are carrying out together with SANCCOB in South Africa.
SANCCOB is a rehabilitation centre. All sorts of seabirds are brought to us, including penguins.
We are taking end-of-season chicks that would not survive in the wild because the parents go into moult and abandon them, hand-rear those chicks and bring them back into the wild colonies once they are fit and ready to go.
The penguin chicks arrive at SANCCOB, normally in quite weak condition. We start feeding them. We make up a fish formula, which is basically a liquidized fish, along with lots of different vitamins and calcium, everything that a chick would need to grow nice and strong. And so that formula is tubed straight into the stomach. Each bird has its own individual card, so we can keep track of everything from what it's eating to what medication it's on. Once they get a little bit stronger, they're standing up, they're eating well, then we start swimming them. By the time we release them, all the penguins need to be able to swim for an hour and have nice dry feathers after that, because they need to survive in a very cold ocean out there. Then we send them out into the wild on a boat near to Robben Island.
A lot of the penguins get a unique flipper band, a unique number on, and we read those out in the field to determine things like their survival in the wild and how they decide where they want to choose to breed.
We have quite a lot of research that's been done already that shows that artificially reared chicks survive as well in the wild as do naturally reared chicks.
One thing is bolstering the wild colonies by just putting more birds in. The other thing is the decline of the African penguin in recent years is very much due to a lack of food for these animals, due to global climate change, which has just changed the currents around the South African Cape, and overfishing. A lot of sardines and anchovies are fished for human consumption.
We actually know very little about what African penguins do between leaving the nest as chicks and returning to breed as adults. So the displacement of the fish has moved the main body of the fish stocks outside of their foraging range when they're breeding. The idea is to try to create an African penguin colony close to the central mass of the fish. Well, no one's tried to do this before, nobody's tried to just create a colony, but the penguins have done it themselves. They've recolonised Robben Island in the 1980s. So the hope with the bolstering project is to be able to release chicks at a site that's been identified as suitable. If you release chicks there and they find food in the vicinity, then they'll stay there and they'll use it as a breeding colony. The thing that we're hoping to do in the near future is to deploy satellite and GPS transmitters onto some of the chicks so that we can follow their movements at sea and look at whether hand-reared chicks behave in the same way as naturally reared chicks and which areas are important to them for foraging. Going to help us with building new colonies. Bristol Zoo are sponsoring my postdoc to do the research, and they've also contributed money towards the tracking devices. So they're putting money in to buy satellite devices that we need. Basically, we couldn't do it without that money.
Our project costs a lot of money each year, and we do have a little SANCCOB penguin here in this enclosure, so people can actually make a big difference in donating some money which will directly go to SANCCOB and to the chick bolstering project.